Hello everyone, welcome to our history class. Okay, we're gonna continue on with our Vietnam War, the actual fighting. So the angry Ho Chi Minh wanted to bring the North and the South together from Vietnam, but America could not let this happen. So in 1961, the US enters the war in December. Except President Lyndon Johnson thought that it would be a really good idea just to train the South Vietnamese people on how to fight and get stronger so that the Americans didn't have to fight. So he told people the troops not to attack anyone on the ground from the years 1965 to 1968. He thought that this would cause a lot of Americans to die. So what he decided instead was something called Operation Rolling Thunder. This was the bombing of North Vietnam. And what they did is they had a lot of planes over like 4 years come and bomb mostly the factories that the North Vietnamese had and the places in the fields where they got food and things like that. They were trying to limit communication to each other so that they couldn't attack the South Vietnamese people. Except the problem was that they were limited to weather. There was a lot of rain during the winter season there. Also, there are many planes that got shot down, and the North Vietnamese had a good air force. Then in 1969, the troops were able to attack on land. And when they did, they had a lot of issues because there were traps set by the North Vietnamese everywhere, traps in the jungle. There was disease like malaria from bugs. If the bugs bit the person and they had a disease inside of them, then that person would get sick and die. There was also heat stroke. It was very hot and humid. This was a jungle, and typically soldiers would be carrying around 80 pounds of packing gear with them in the middle of the summer in the heat. Also, the North Vietnamese people would hide in the jungle and attack the troops when they were running through. In 1968, on January 30, it was the celebration of the Lunar New Year, called the Tet celebration. So the government decided on both sides that they were going to stop for this holiday because it was very important to all of the Vietnamese people. So they had a truce. No one was allowed to fire, except in South Vietnam, the soldiers all left their training places and their posts and their bunkers, and they went to major cities to relax with family or friends, and they just enjoyed the holiday. Except some secret Northerners came into the South and disguised as people living in the South. They attacked on that night the entire city, even though about 100 different cities, even though they said that they weren't going to attack anyone. This was called the Tet Offensive because they broke the rule that they were going to not fire on anyone. Then came to office President Richard Nixon, and he said, "Let's get them out of here." On July 1969, he wanted to pull the troops out of Vietnam. Finally, in 1975, in April, the South Vietnam people had to surrender to the North Vietnamese. Vietnam was now a united communist country. Unfortunately, USA lost the war. We had 58,220 U.S. soldiers that died, and millions of Vietnamese people died during this time. Remember, the Cold War lasted actually from 1947 to 1991. It was 45 years long, and this was a time where America and Russia were fighting against ideas about communistic government and democratic government. And these two, the Vietnam War was considered a proxy war during the Cold War because the United States supported the South Vietnamese and the Soviet Union and Russia supported the North. So even though they didn't technically go to war per se, they were still using people or pieces to get done what they wanted to get done.